So, in United States culture, the term child abuser is generally associated exclusively with people who sexually assault children or attempt to do that and are caught, or people who physically injure children intentionally. Um, so the issue is statistically the number of those people who are caught and convicted of those crimes uh, is very small. So culturally, we are supposed to believe, or we would be led to believe by what I just described, that child abuse is a relatively rare occurrence. This is an obvious problem, right? Because that's not at all true. Those are examples of child abuse, undoubtedly and undeniably. Yeah. However, the abuse of children is literally all around us. Like it's happening right now within like on the block of the neighborhood that I live in, right? I know this is occurring. I just watched a school bus come pick up children from my neighborhood. A school bus is a form of slave ship, basically. Is it as bad as the slave ships docking on American or at American harbors during the years of the African slave trade? No, of course not. But it's on that continuum. It's a slave ship where children are forced to get on and forced to be taken to schools where they are forced to conform to ideological standards and where they are increasingly being murdered by their classmates who are losing their mind and the adults around them are not held accountable for that. Right? Okay, so the issue is child abuse begins with the decision to have a child in the first place, which causes the suffering and death of another human being. Fortunately, few people are able to even recognize this clear and obvious fact of biology. Right? This is not something you can deny. This is as obvious as anything else. And this is done without the consent of the victim, of course, because that's impossible. It's impossible to get their consent. And ethically, as far as I'm concerned, case closed. You know, there should be no further consideration. But people don't stop to consider this. They don't care that they're causing a child to suffer and die. They reproduce anyway. Then they claim that the child is their property, right? Which is slavery. So this form of abuse is quickly followed up by another form of abuse, which is the very concept of owning another human being is inherently abusive. The child is then often subjected to continuous and years, like decades, if not a lifetime, of psychological abuse, verbal abuse. They are belittled, they are made to feel like a slave, right? They are told that they are a slave, they are told that they must conform to standards of obedience. And if they resist at any point, they are punished violently in some form or another. Usually not physically, but sometimes, right? It's everything up to and including them just being killed, like beaten to death. This happens. Yeah. So how is it the case that culture could maintain a delusion that's as profound as the idea that child abuse is rare? That it's not happening basically all around us all the time, every day. Why? How is this happening? It's very simple. It's a process. It's a cycle, right, of victimization, where today's victims become tomorrow's abusers. That's how reproduction works. That's how traumatic abuse cycles work in general. It doesn't have to involve reproduction, but reproduction is the clearest example of this. It's the most fundamental abuse cycle that there is, essentially. Yeah, how do people fall into this? How do they get deluded? It's the idea that being mature, being a grown-up, is defined by paying your bills, essentially. If you show up to work on time, if you pay your car insurance and your phone bill and your child support payment, your alimony maybe, or if you buy a camper, in a house, you make your mortgage payment. Well, if you do all that, then it earns you the right to abuse children, right? Except that's obviously absurd, right? But there are unfortunately billions of human beings right now who believe that, whether they're willing to admit it or not, that paying your bills, going to church every Sunday, making it to work on time, following all the traffic laws, being an obedient slave. They think that being an obedient slave entitles them to abusing other slaves. Sound familiar? I mean, this is like a very natural occurrence. But it doesn't, right? Like actual emotional maturity, actual growth as a human being, whatever we associate with being a quote-unquote adult, being a grown-up, being responsible, right? It entails exactly that, responsibility. Accepting responsibility for the consequences of your actions. That is the key trait exhibited by someone who is emotionally mature, is they are capable of taking responsibility for their actions, both so that they plan in the most accurate way possible for them to accept responsibility ongoingly into the future before things occur. But also, and perhaps more importantly, they accept responsibility for their past mistakes. Right? So if you've, for example, brought a child into the world with good intentions, it's your responsibility to acknowledge the reality of what you've done and then hold yourself accountable to the victim of your abuse, the child, and do everything you possibly can for them. Because you'll never be able to do enough. You can't make it up to them. You can't take it back. Right? That's an emotionally mature, quote-unquote, parent, is someone who realizes that. Oh my God, what have I done? All I've done is pass the buck of my own problems on to another victim, an innocent, like totally innocent, totally defenseless victim without their consent. I need to be a grown-up and hold myself responsible for the consequences of my actions. That's someone who I respect, a great deal. And they're unfortunately extremely rare. I've never met such a parent, I should say. I've never met someone who actually says that. I know they exist. They must exist. But you don't hear from them. But I've met countless examples of, let's see, what's the archetype around me? Yeah, it's the Christian child abuser. The Christian child abuser. Someone who's convinced that because they believe in Jesus and they go to church and or read their Bible and do their devotionals and listen to their Christian radio station and maybe participate in charity programs, perhaps charity programs that are aimed at helping children even, right? They think that all of this entitles them to abusing children. It's a ruse, and to believe such a thing, you'd have to be yourself an idiot, right? To be fooled by that ruse. But they do, unfortunately, because people are that gullible, and or people are that interested in committing child abuse themselves, and they are interested in normalizing the behavior. It's another classic maneuver of abusive psychopaths, basically, is to join forces with each other in order to normalize their behavior. Yeah, they're all around. I mean, they're all convinced that somehow believing in Jesus entitles you to cause irreparable psychological and physical harm to other human beings. I don't buy that. I think that is hypocrisy, something that the biblical Jesus was very preoccupied with making a fuss about, right? Didn't punch anyone in the face, didn't, kill anybody. But he did things like damage property over this. He did things like shout in your face in public, accusing you openly of your hypocrisy, your lies, and your abuse, your harmfulness. That you're a bad person. Let's face it. That's what it comes down to. Jesus didn't hold back from going up to the face of abusive hypocrites who get away with hiding behind state authority, religious authority, hiding behind the foolishness of their fellow human beings, getting away with harming people, with abusing people, with presumed impunity. The biblical Jesus had no problem with going up to your face and telling you, you're a liar, you're a hypocrite. And in your own religion, you're subject to the judgment of Almighty God. You'll be the first to taste the flames of hell, you damned hypocrite. But I guess they don't believe in that Jesus. They believe in the other one, the one that Donald Trump believes in. Good luck.